Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor, and today I'm joined by Jeanne Michele. Jeanne is a trailblazer in personal development, combining over 2 decades of expertise in teaching, modern philosophy, and coaching to empower individuals, couples, and leaders to turn their deepest aspirations into reality. Known for her innovative approach, Jeanne helps clients navigate complex relational challenges and everyday struggles, offering fresh, transformative perspectives beyond traditional methods. Holding a PhD in psychology and a master's in spiritual psychology, she is dedicated to guiding people through some of life's toughest challenges. This fall, she released her debut book, The Infidelity Cure: How to Rebuild Your Life and Relationship After Your Affair, a powerful resource for individuals and couples seeking to heal and transform their relationships. We are excited to welcome Jeanne to explore her insights on male infidelity, its impact on relationships, and her approach to helping couples heal and rebuild trust through vulnerability, self-awareness, and a shift towards more collaborative partnership. Jeanne, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Graham. I'm really delighted to be here.
It is really nice to have you. You know, as we start out today, congratulations on your book. That's always quite an endeavor, I know, and congratulations for getting this out.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's
It's been a
good.
work in progress for sure.
So this is the book about men, relationships, affairs. As we start out, what explains your interest in choosing male infidelity, kind of as a central theme in your book?
Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that affairs only occur, that men are the only people that engage in affairs, clearly. But what happened, Graham, and I don't know if you find this in your practice as well, all of these men started showing up in my office, knocking on my door and saying, "Can you help me?" I realized that I have hurt my partner deeply. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. And they came in with such humility and such desire to really help their partner heal. And I found that within a matter of a couple of months, I had 2, 3, 4 of these men. It's like it seemed to be that they were the ones that were showing up for me,
Is that right?
you know? And again, I found their humility and their desire to connect. It really touched my heart.
Yeah.
And I think about the stigma that society holds on infidelity. It's tough. We use words like cheater, he's a cheater. And, we have this idea about cheating. You get an F on a test when you cheat. I don't use that word in my book because I think it's a label. And so we look at
What's
affairs
the
or
risk of
affair
using that as a
behavior.
label? Do you find? Yeah. What's the risk therapeutically? You use words like betrayal, infidelity of
hmm
trust. And I want to find
hmm
out exactly what you mean by a breach of trust or the infidelity, what that actually
hmm
means, because it's not. I think there's probably a number of levels for it, but you're talking about the importance of choosing words properly
hmm hmm
to therapeutically kind of till the soil for discussions that can
hmm
probably be more positive and growth
hmm
oriented than maybe ones like
hmm
that are more labeling, cheater, et cetera.
hmm Right. I love what you share about tilling the soil. Great metaphor. Because what we do is we want to set the stage
Hmm.
for healthy healing and well being. And when you label someone as a cheater, what you're not saying is, you behaved in a way that was incongruent with the commitment you made to our relationship, whether it's a long term relationship, whether it's a marriage. And when I say you are a cheater, that puts a label on you and identifies you as opposed to a behavior which can be worked through. Labels seem to stick. And there's such a connotation that comes with that just has such negativity to it.
Yeah.
I just don't like the label. I don't know what your thoughts are on that as
Well,
far as
I
labeling
think
is
it's a,
concerned.
I think it's a good thought. Let me hold my thought. I mean, I can
Sure.
weave it
Okay.
in with
All
something
right.
I'm going to ask you right now, and then we can weave it in together. When we talk about a betrayal or infidelity of trust, what are we talking
Mhm.
about? And
Mhm.
what kind of levels are there of betrayal and infidelity?
So I believe a betrayal of any kind,
Hmm.
okay, is when you you act in a way that, again, is incongruent, inconsistent with a commitment you have made with somebody.
Got it.
So whether that's a small commitment, you know what? I promise that I am going to book a date for us this Saturday and I will show up for you and I'll be there on time. And you don't. You let something else get in the way. Now that's
Yeah.
a smaller betrayal, but anytime you make a commitment to somebody, the bigger betrayals are you're in a monogamous relationship and you love one
Right.
another and somebody at work turns your head and you start noticing that you're paying attention to them. You go out and have a drink with them and you put your hand on their leg or you
Mm.
give them a hug that lingers too long. You're starting to do things that you probably wouldn't share with your spouse or with
Yes,
your
I
partner.
get it.
So I think that's an indicator.
Right. I think that's a really important piece. So if we go back to thoughts around the importance of using words selectively and intentionally
Mhm.
to, if we say something, you are a cheater,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's a shame-based message.
Right.
And
Mhm.
it's one that's easy to say. It's one that's very
Mhm.
hard to receive. And that becomes someone's
Mhm.
identity. And that's
Mhm.
kind of a shame-based versus maybe a guilt-based one that says, it's more about what I did,
Yeah.
not so much
Right.
about who I
Right.
am per se. And it sounds like the cool part you were
Right.
noticing is that guys were coming in with curiosity and humility and a desire to try and mend things. But there was a
Mhm.
curiosity as to the why behind what I did, not who I am per se, but what I did and why.
Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful. I love the way you are in tune with language. I too believe language is critical.
Mm,
How we think about it, the words that come out of our mouth, because once you say something, it's like sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. So not true. Words hurt and words stick.
that's right.
So, going back to the idea of the shame based labels,
Yes.
it guilt and shame are different. To be remorseful and have guilt over an action you took is appropriate and necessary, unless you have some really tough personality disorder that, that makes it more difficult for you to do that. People come in with remorse. So when a man comes in, because we're talking about male infidelity, sits on my couch and I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I don't know what happened. It's genuine. And what we do is we take a look at what I call affair vulnerability factors. What were the factors? Not as an excuse, because when you engage in a behavior that hurts another person, you need to take 100% responsibility and take ownership for that. Now, there are influences that could have contributed to setting the stage and making it a little more easy for you to turn your head instead of talking about things, but that doesn't mean you're not responsible for your actions.
Mm,
So we look at vulnerability factors about, sometimes it's having a career change or something that happens that is unexpected, and they're feeling more vulnerable and it makes them more susceptible to, having someone say, "Hey, you know what? You're a good guy. I really like working on that project for you. Man, you're so smart." And those pieces can feel good and create a little bit of vulnerability, particularly when at home, you might not be getting that same level of, connection that you've had in the past.
mm.
Or, you and your spouse could be fighting a lot and you're not talking about things. I think a big key is that you're not talking about things that matter with the people that matter. And you're acting them out or you're susceptible to attention coming from someplace else. So you could have
I
a
think that's a
spouse or
really
parent that died.
it's
Mm,
also about loss. So you're talking about there's career
yes.
changes, fights at home, we're not
Mhm,
talking. We're talking about
mhm,
loss, maybe, of one's
absolutely.
say more about that piece.
Mhm. I think when you experience loss, there's an emptiness inside that you're looking at trying to fill, okay?
Mm,
And in an ideal world, you can say to your spouse, "I am feeling this way," or "I've got this going on and I'm not sure how to manage it." However, sometimes it's tough to identify your feelings. Sometimes you don't even really, you know, know exactly labeling feelings. And I don't know if you find this in your practice too, can be difficult. Sometimes you're not in touch with the nuances of your feelings. And
yes.
sometimes the communication isn't you don't feel as connected. Even if you don't have it fully formulated about what's going on, I'm feeling off right now. Something is going on with me. I'm not feeling like myself these days. And if you're with a partner and your partner takes the time to listen to you and the two of you start to talk about it, something can emerge that you may not have even identified as something that was going on inside,
Yeah.
you know?
What a helpful process. I guess in some ways too, I think about, do men encounter any unique
Mhm.
challenges as you've seen in your work when navigating the aftermath of an affair, both within themselves and in the attempt to reconnect with their partner? Any unique challenges
Mhm.
there for them?
Well, what I find, and I'd love you to weigh in on this as a man, is that women naturally tend to talk about things. It's easy. I mean, even coming in to see me, I have a woman that will say, you know what, things are a little bit off, so I needed to come in for a tune up. Typically, the first time men come in, they are facing, I say they've been run over by a truck and they're bleeding and they don't know what to do.
Right.
They typically come in when things are in more dire straits. And I think part of that is the gender based conditioning that we receive growing up. It's
Yeah.
acceptable for women to cry and for women to, have show emotions and in the traditional masculinity, we say that's not okay. So I think in essence, it tends to be more difficult for men to have these discussions, especially with other men. Sometimes they end up having the discussion with women because it's easier, but then that can also, if you're not you're not stating your boundaries, that can sometimes result in connections that engage in behavior that wouldn't be supported by the marriage. And just to continue, what I do find is that when men come into my practice, they really appreciate, and when I say they, I don't mean to stereotype, but when I have men come in, typically the experience is it's an open space. They
Mm.
feel safe. I'm not sitting in any type of judgment, and we go really deep. And so I think it's an experience that's a little bit of an anomaly in the world, typically for men, until they start honing those skills. Sometimes you have a really good buddy that you can talk about anything with, but I don't find that that tends to be the norm. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Graham.
I couldn't agree with you more. I, th- I think society has been brutal on men, to be honest with you. And I think they've been
Mhm,
involved in creating real confusion around, what is masculinity and what's toxic
mhm,
and, all these
mhm.
things. It just gets so
Yep.
confusing. And
Mhm,
on top of that, I think, like you said, boys aren't taught to share. They're taught to suck it up. Brene Brown talks
mhm,
about an experience she had with a man that she met during some book signing. I don't know if you've heard about this, but she's doing a book signing, and the guy walks up to her table and he says, "Have you written any books on men?" And she said, "No, I
mhm.
haven't." He said, "Well, isn't that convenient?" Kind of caught her off guard,
Oh,
and
wow. No, I
he
haven't
talked
heard
about
that.
how he said, "My family would
Mhm,
rather I die on my white horse than come down and talk about the struggles that I'm having." And that captures something I think is pretty good. Men have a hard time with shame because we
mhm,
get personalized. It's us who we are. If we do certain things,
mhm,
express certain
mhm,
things, it's not so much guilt. It's more times than not taken on as shame. I'm sure
mhm,
you see that too.
mhm,
And so, yeah, I think those gender-based things, I think the societal pieces really make it tough to maybe even talk about some things early on in a relationship, even in a preventative way.
mhm,
We look back
mhm.
and say, well, why couldn't you talk about that? Or why didn't you intervene earlier? Why did you let this happen? Was there a place where you could have had an off ramp and then gone back and talked
Mhm,
about it in the relationship? And
mhm,
guys, like you're saying, sometimes say, well, how do you do that? What do you say? Um, no.
mhm.
So,
I
yeah.
think that is really critical because what I tend to find is when the relationship, people are getting along and the relationship's going okay, no one wants to rock the boat and say, oh my gosh, especially guys. Oh, I have something, yeah, that I want to talk about that's been bothering me. It's like, no, she's good. We're good. I
Yeah,
don't,
don't rock it.
don't
Yeah.
rock it. And then when things are rocky and you guys are arguing, you don't want to bring up something else that makes it worse. And I think it's learning for both people how to be more mindful and present and authentic about and honest, first with yourself, I'm a little off, something's going on. And then to cultivate a trust with your partner that you can share some things that maybe you don't even have fully formed yet, that you just want support in and you want to talk about. And I think it's difficult and it's doable. It's
It is
doable.
doable. Yeah. Yeah, it is doable. Tell me then, I mean, you're talking about some things that maybe in lieu of being able to do this early in the relationship, almost maybe
Mhm,
preemptively before something
mhm,
happens,
mhm.
they're going to have to do it at some point thereafter. So for someone who has just discovered or admitted to
Mhm.
an affair, in your work, what are some of the first steps towards healing for the individual themselves and as you begin to take a look at their relationship that's been impacted?
Well, I have some things that I call do's and don'ts. You know, one of the big don'ts, it's like there's a chapter that's emergency, that kind of 911 emergency. What do you
Right.
do at the beginning? Because it's really important. And it's when emotions are wild and all over the place. Okay.
Mm.
So one is, and it may sound simple, but don't lie. And don't lie even about the little things, because as you are rebuilding trust, little lies or half truths really, every time that occurs as you're rebuilding trust, it takes the person back to the beginning. And then we get the label of you're a liar. So
Yes.
it makes it more difficult to rebuild trust. And the flip side of that is do set appropriate boundaries. I find sometimes with a couple, the partner can say, I want to know exactly what you did with that person, when, how many times, I want details. To share sexual details is a big mistake because it is really difficult for a partner to erase the images from their mind. Again, the images will probably come up anyway of speculation, but when that stuff is shared, it's really difficult. Now, it can be hard setting boundaries around that, but I think, one of the ways to do it, again, is to work on being as authentic, I say kind and direct as possible, and say, I don't think that that is really uh, that's not something that I think would be helpful for us to move forward if I share the details of that. I
Mm.
really don't want to. And then sometimes you need to get outside help because infidelity is difficult to heal on your own, especially when emotions are, and it's be careful of the commitments you make. It's tricky, for a guy that's had an affair because on one hand, they really need to do what to really be diligent about rebuilding the trust, really to come forward and to take care of their spouse and help her heal her heart.
Mhm.
There is a tendency to overpromise, though, and overpromising can get you in trouble too, like saying yes to everything because you just want to make sure she's okay. But you really have to learn to take a step back and consider, can I really get that done in the time frame that I have going on in my world? And it's okay to say, you know what? Let me think about that and I'll get back with you. I want to make sure I can meet that commitment. So again, it's learning how to deal with things that really don't have direct, that aren't directly having to do with the infidelity, but are having to do with relationships. How can
Yes.
you communicate better and show up? All of the things that we would like to have in a close relationship.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to go down just a wee bit deeper in this because I think it's, when we're coming back and we're beginning to do the work itself, our
Mhm.
trust, with one another is something that we choose to give to the other. It's built on
I like
vulnerability.
that.
It's something
Mhm,
freely that's given, and ideally,
mhm,
it's seen
mhm,
as a gift in the
mhm,
in the relationship. You've got my heart, and ideally, you're going to
mhm.
cherish and
Right,
respect
right,
that.
right.
And not surprisingly, with infidelity, as you're intimating here, comes this breach of trust. But after the
Mhm,
breach comes the task of having, and should folks decide to stay together, some pretty difficult and courageous conversations, like you're saying right
mhm,
now.
mhm,
Share with us a little bit more about how you instruct folks to approach these conversations, not just with you and what you're modeling for them, but maybe
mhm,
outside in their times together of therapy with you,
mhm,
and how you help couples in these initial stages, of addressing this betrayal. And what are some of the
mhm.
common issues and feelings that you see really surfacing in some pretty powerful ways?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, for the man who's had the affair, know that your partner's emotions are going to be a roller coaster. They could go from, honey, I really love you and I miss you and I want to work through this. That's the spouse sharing that to,
Yes.
I want to connect with you to, you're an SOB. I can't believe you did that. And they can change in a nanosecond. So be aware that there's going to be an emotional roller coaster. So
Yes.
that is a piece of it. And then as far as the rebuilding of the trust, I love what you're sharing. I think of, I look at this image I have behind me
Yes.
of the heart, and it's like, I love what you said about trust is a gift. You say, I'm handing you my heart and I want you to treasure that. And in betrayal, the heart was not treasured. So how can you, connect more deeply from a heart and really value that gift? I think engaging in deeper conversations are important. And, we're not taught how to do that. No one in school teaches you how to engage in meaningful conversations. I love what John and Julie Gottman, relationship therapists, talk about regarding a harsh versus a soft startup. When
Yes.
you are engaging in a conversation, especially a difficult one, and either one or both is heated and passionate and fiery, that's not the best time to talk about difficult things. A soft startup involves each person having, being in a state of greater emotional regulation and, setting aside a time to talk about it and making sure that you're not hungry, you're not tired, you're not irritable, you didn't come home from a tough work day. So you really need to set the stage and start softly. I'd really like to talk about this. It's really important to me. And it
Yeah.
could be difficult because I'm having a lot of emotions. Part of it is to, as an individual, be able to state where you are. Here's where I am. Are you open to having this conversation now? Where are you? And that is one of the key elements for setting the stage for being able to engage, especially in difficult conversations.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Nearly 9 in 10 registered voters believe the nation faces a mental health crisis, according to a new USA Today Suffolk University poll. Americans are more concerned than ever about their mental health. Mental health first aid provides the resources and training to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health and substance use challenges. It provides the confidence and skills needed to offer life-saving assistance, and it provides peace of mind. Our experts provide mental health first aid training for adults, teens, caregivers, veterans, law enforcement, EMS, and school faculty. Mental health concerns are on the rise, but evidence-based training through mental health first aid can make a difference. Visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org to find a course near you, or email hello@mentalhealthfirstaid.org to schedule a training. Courses are available for individuals, groups, organizations, and companies of all sizes. Visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org and make a difference in your community.
That's a really lovely answer. I think what you're, intimating towards too is that in order to heal, we have to tap in almost to a higher self, and that is fraught with all
Mhm.
kinds of thoughts and emotions and feelings and reactions and all kinds of things spinning out of control. And I think
Mhm.
it's so helpful to look at some of the healing in stages, in the early stages. Maybe we just do all of our work here in the
Mhm.
therapist office
Mhm.
because it is so potentially,
Yes.
ignitable here and incendiary because these topics are
Mhm.
so painful. I
Mhm.
also love what you're intimating too, and suggesting, not even intimating, you're suggesting here, Jeannie, is we have to create meaning for what happened. And if we can create meaning and really be curious when we're
Mhm.
working with couples and help them develop a similar
Mhm.
curiosity,
Mhm.
it's not so much about what happened and how
Mhm.
it happened and what was going on per se, but being curious as to how did it happen? Why? What was the why behind it? The meaning behind it
Mhm.
that I think almost gives a foundation for now that we understand the why, we can make sense of the what and the how that occurred and not to dismiss
Mhm.
it, but
Mhm.
it happened for a reason. You and I were
Mhm.
talking about at the beginning of the show. I oftentimes use there's always two I's and a we in a relationship.
Mhm.
And you talked
Mhm.
about, remind me again,
You, me, and us, and
you,
you
me,
have
and
to feed
us.
all three.
Right. There's a you, me, and us. And
Mhm.
there's a we in this as well, which is oftentimes
Right.
challenging to get
Right.
to because if you hurt me, I don't want to look at my
Mm.
piece. I want I want to,
Right.
I want you to see how pained I was in this.
Mm-hmm.
But as we talk about this meaning, the meaning behind it is such an important thing. And I think having the therapist to walk them through at least the initial stages
Mm-hmm.
makes it
Mm-hmm.
safe to start talking in a new way,
Yes.
a way that's necessary to heal.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. This is one thing that is extremely challenging, and I'm not sure it's 100% possible to work through without some intervention, especially
Absolutely.
early on,
Yeah.
because people come in and we listen and we help. We do psychoeducation. We help teach them about things that maybe they never learned. And
Mhm.
coming back to the why, I think it's looking at those factors. And one thing I will say that contributed, the contributing factors, the vulnerability factors. And one thing I will say for the spouse, here's a tricky thing about the why. Spouses want to know why. There is a piece that they will never fully understand ever. And that eternal search for the why it can also, lead to a lot of frustration and arguments. I don't understand why. I would never do this to you. Yes, we were going through a rough patch, but I would never do this to you. Why did you do this? You got to
Yes.
be really careful to not beat someone over the head with the why, but to look at what are the factors. Was our life on autopilot? Where were we not talking? What do we want to create in the future? How can we best heal? How can I hold you in a way that you feel like I'm holding your heart? I think it's to be able to ask those questions to one
Yeah.
another. And like you said, we help educate and teach them how to do that in the room and then give them pieces to execute on their own outside of the room. One
Right.
thing I say to couples when they first come in is we do the heavy lifting here. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but my recommendation is please don't have deep, heavy conversations about this outside of this room. Try to go outside of the room and see how you can engage. I love always be curious. You talked about curiosity, the ABC, always be curious. Do something new together. What are some ways that you can engage? And if in that moment you don't feel like engaging and it's like, it's too much for me right now, I need some space, own that, state that, and the two of you navigate that together. That's really critical because those conversations can heat up and burn really quickly.
What I find at times in those conversations is that there's an underlying factor that most don't appreciate. And I'm sure and I think you're leaning into it here. Because if the, be- if the trust has been betrayed, the person that's been betrayed has unknowingly a self meaning that is being stirred up. What does it say about
Mhm,
me that you would go outside of our relationship? And so when
mhm,
I'm asking all these questions, what I'm really
mhm,
trying to go after unknowingly, and we kind of become a dog on
mhm,
a bone sometimes around this,
mhm.
is I need to know what's it say about me that you did what you did.
Yes.
And I think what can be really helpful sometimes is to maybe put a pause on
Mhm,
trying to provide explanations that somehow will tap into the meaning and go right down to
mhm,
the self meaning and say, what do you hold about what this might mean about you as a partner and this being done to you? And having
mhm,
that come out
mhm,
right at the beginning.
mhm,
Because
mhm.
oftentimes I think when things get heated unknowingly, I can't have this be true about me. So I want to make it about you. And why did you do this? And
Yeah,
what were you thinking? And rather than
yeah.
saying, man, this really makes me feel like maybe somehow I wasn't lovable enough, or maybe I wasn't enough for you. Or maybe my worst fear is that
Absolutely.
I'm just so lacking that
Yeah.
it goes back on my own family of origin and all these things that we can
Mhm,
begin to piece together.
mhm.
But that's what's being fought out sometimes. Do you find that too?
Oh my God, absolutely. I have a chapter in the book for the woman that has been betrayed, and we really talk about that because women in particular, mm, female infidelity is different. We could do a whole nother show on that. But when we're talking about women and what's wrong with me? Why am I not enough? What did I do? And a woman experiences the shame too. What do people think of me? My husband cheated. What does that say about me? And the shame of having people, know that she had a spouse that betrayed her.
That's
It's
right.
huge. It's huge. And that sense of angst about oneself. is really big too. And it absolutely needs to be worked on. And one of the things, we work on with the women are, where have you not been setting boundaries? Where have you not been
Mm.
honoring who you are? Where have you maybe swallowed your voice in this relationship and not talked about your needs? That's a piece of what gets cultivated too in infidelity recovery. She also needs to get stronger in who she is and communicating her wants, needs, and desires. And self-care is really huge in this too. Recognizing that some of the work for each person, going back to, you said the I and the we, I say the you, me,
Right.
and us. We need to make sure that each person does their own work. The man, in this case, the one who has betrayed, really needs to do work on his own. She can't fix him. He can't fix her. However, the relationship is wounded as well. So it's
Yes.
really addressing all of those factors.
Yeah, those are good. With that in mind, let's talk about the type of growth that you're seeing being possible for a couple, both
Mhm.
individually and in their partnership. Should they decide to stay and work this out? What's the growth looking like?
So here's what happens in a crisis like this. It's like you get hit over the head and it is front and center. So normally, the kids, taking them to sports, work and whatever, it can be all consuming. Something like this shows up. The urgency is so high that I think the ability to pay attention and to learn and to cultivate new things is very high as well. And what I find in many, many factors, in many relationships, is the relationship actually gets better and people learn and become more communicative afterwards because you're looking at the relationship and each person. What do I want? What does a thriving life look like for me as an individual? How can I support you in doing the things that you really want to do? I used to play guitar and I haven't played the guitar in years. Well, how do I support you in that? And it breaks something open. It breaks
Yes.
something
Yes.
open,
Yeah.
and which lends itself when people really have a strong desire to work on this, to looking at and cultivating something new. And I think that's the magic at the core of what can happen when a crisis like this hits.
Yeah. That's really good. I think there's some literature, good literature on the therapeutic alliance. And
Mm,
early in the work, if you hit a rough spot
mhm,
and
mhm,
it feels like it's really contentious or really difficult, if that therapist and the person seeing them, the patient, if they can work through that, the research
mhm,
shows that that is a really, really solid therapeutic alliance that can
mhm,
do some phenomenal work in therapy together. If they can work
mhm,
through that, difficult part. And I think that's the same
mhm,
potential you're suggesting here for couples. That if we can work through
mhm,
this, the
mhm.
strength of our relationship and the honesty within it that we now have can really be held together with some things that maybe wouldn't have been held together had we not gone through this and
Mhm.
healed from it. For men specifically, where do you see men growing that maybe in ways that they hadn't experienced aspects of themselves before, but men growing through this process of healing and kind of expanding who they are?
So I want to speak to one thing before I get to that, that
Yeah.
that also occurs, can occur, and you're talking about the therapeutic alliance, you're talking about relationship, is acceptance.
Mhm.
We had, whether it's someone coming in to see us and they have, what you said last week, I didn't really like the way you said it. When they have permission to show up and state something they're not happy with us, and we take it
Yes.
in and accept it and say, oh, I get that.
Yep.
Always tell me. Always.
Yep.
We're two different human beings. I may say something and mean something else, which occurs
That's
a lot in
huge.
any relationship. You take it to mean this and you get upset here. Talk to me. And then as we accept and love them anyway, I think there's a great healing factor. And the person who has betrayed also needs to rebuild a trust in their partner. You know, I trust that I can talk to you about some things, then you're not going to use it to beat me up when you're mad at me next time. So it's a rebuilding trust on both ends. And like you said, So many times, I'm sure with you too, a couple will come in and say, boy, we've been through a lot together. Those are growing points. We've been through a lot. We're resilient. We made it to the other side. That also helps. Okay, well, you made it through this.
Mm.
That gives you a model. Well, okay, how does that apply to what you're going through now? So I think the cultivation of resilience in the face of loss, in the face of, sadness, in the face of, I stepped on your toe and I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry's are really important, how you deliver those.
Yeah.
Again, it creates connection, it can, and trust in the relationship and trust in the other person. I think
Really
that's a
good.
huge part of this.
I think that's so right on. And I think that's a optimistic kind of prognosis. This is what we can have.
Right, right,
If we can
right.
do this right, and the path that you're
Mhm,
walking folks
mhm,
through and the
mhm,
shepherding that you're providing them along the way,
mhm,
there's some
mhm,
real hope in this. And I guess maybe
mhm,
as we begin to wind the bend for today, what do you
mhm,
hope most for listeners of
mhm,
today's show and for those who read your book to have as a
mhm.
takeaway on this infidelity challenge and the opportunities that therapy might provide?
I think that change is possible. Change is doable. We have this idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's not true. If what you want is important enough to you, you are able to look at things differently, be curious, shift your behavior. So I guess at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is to offer hope. If this is something you really want, then put the effort in, and it can create stronger connection with your partner. It can create the ability to communicate in a much more effective manner. You can learn how to adjust your communication styles if you come in with different communication styles in a way that creates connection and in a way that you model as a couple what it it means to be able to grow through a crisis. You see a couple that has had betrayal and then they emerge stronger and they say, you know what? We trust each other. It also sets the stage for so many other people. Affairs and they have a rippling effect.
Yes.
They touch many more people than you would ever imagine. And so as you heal, that also holds out positivity and possibility for you and for the people around you.
Yeah.
So I guess the big word I keep coming back to is hope
It is hope.
and that it's doable. It really truly is doable. Time and time again, I've seen this happen. And if a couple is not able to make it work, there was most likely, in what I find to be, I'd say almost in 100% of the cases, there's something in that relationship that really and truly wasn't working in the past. They haven't addressed. They really went in different directions. Then how do you amicably split and create lives on your own and what's next for you?
Right. Right. Really wonderful. I love the idea of hope that it is possible that folks want to stay and lean into it with some help, like
Mhm,
what you provide them. And in
mhm,
terms of that, for our listeners interested in your work, listening in today,
mhm.
how can they learn more about you and what your new book, The Infidelity Cure, how to rebuild your life and relationship after your affair? How can they find you?
So there's two ways. One is my website is drjeanniemichele.com, which is spelled DrJeannemichle.com. I spell it because I spell both names differently.
Right.
And the other is the infidelitycure.com, and that's really more specifically on the book. And I would love anyone if has any questions, they can also email me. My email is on there too. I think really what this is about for me is like what we are doing today. It's creating conversations. It's
That's
creating
right.
transformational conversation that plant seeds, like you mentioned earlier, that cause people to say, I'd like to learn more about that. Where are you curious? So anyway, that's my
Really good.
answer to that. Yeah.
Really
Thank you.
good. Well, it's been great to have you on the show today.
Mhm.
Congratulations on your book. We'd love to
Thank
have you
you.
back and maybe talk about the female side, like you just suggested earlier in our show. It'd be great to have you kind of do the other side of the coin. But be nice
I'd
to have you
love
back.
that. And I'd also like to talk about masculinity. I have this whole another book called The New Masculine Code. I'd love to do that one with you too. So
That
I've
would be
enjoyed
wonderful.
connecting with you so much, Graham, and I
We
thank you
have as
for this
well.
time.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. It's
Okay.
been great to have you on this show. Thank you, Jeannie.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Take care. Bye bye.
I also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining Jeanne and me today. It's always great to have you with us. And by the way, we'd love your help. Would you consider leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with a friend? By spreading the word, you help us grow, reach more people, allowing others to discover the valuable insights shared in each of our episodes. Thanks for being such an important part of the Behavioral Health Today community. Regarding today's episode, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.